Ex-Atheists, what changed your mind? I grew up in a religious household and, like most teenagers, rebelled against religion. It seemed like my parents would always use religion as justification to make me do what they wanted me to do. The more educated I became, the more religion seemed ridiculous. I was in a scary situation once, and that's when I realized whenever I was scared or worried, I was talking to an invisible guy upstairs. It started to dawn on me that I wasn't as happy as I could be, and religion and coming back to God gave that to me. I still hate the way people use religion for their own gain, but I realized that believing in something more can be useful and give you a peace of mind, etc. I think religion could be a good thing if you're willing to live and respect people and their beliefs. I don't use it to make all my decisions, and I don't force my views on others.
It's interesting how people can shift their views over time. Growing up in a strict environment can really push you to rebel. That moment of fear leading you to find comfort in faith is relatable. It's all about finding your own balance. Being open to different beliefs while maintaining your own space is key. At the end of the day, respect goes a long way in discussions about something as personal as religion.
I used to be the euphoric kind teenager atheist. I even had a Twitter account that I used to argue with Christians because rational, intelligence, fiction book, and all that bullshit. When I started growing up, however, I started reading about a lot of religions. First because I wanted to know how to argue against them, then because I grew interested in them. A year or two later, I discovered Buddhism, and everything about it rang true to me. I felt a connection. And when I started practicing, I felt whole, I felt strong, and felt like I was growing as a person. I still cringe about the euphoric phase, though. Edit. English is not my first language. Also, first post on Reddit. Not a lurker anymore. Laughing face.
It's interesting how perspectives change over time. I remember being pretty idealistic too, debating everything from my point of view. Then, as you said, I started exploring different beliefs out of curiosity. It's funny how what you once rejected can end up resonating with you. Finding something like Buddhism must feel like a significant shift. It's normal to look back and cringe, though. We all have those phases.
I found a religion that didn't conflict with my rationality, and that was approachable and low-key. I think a lot of religions do a disservice to themselves by alienating critical thinkers. They end up turning people off to faith and spirituality altogether. Faith is a powerful servant if you can master it without turning into a zealot. And spirituality has enriched my life a lot. Edit, downvoted right out of the gate. I guess I'm not surprised. People get very close-minded around here when it comes to this topic. Edit 2. I'm a Quaker for those who have asked. FGC for the other friend in the room. Edit 3. Edits, editing edits. What's the world coming to? Edit 4. Wow. I'm pretty blown away by the response to this. I never thought Reddit would be so interested in my religion. I'm going to do my best to respond as much as possible, but I'm at work now, so it will be intermittent.
It's interesting how some find a spiritual path that aligns with their rational thinking. A friend of mine explored different beliefs and settled on something that felt right without the usual dogma. He said it gave him peace and a deeper understanding of himself. I think finding that balance is key. It's all about what enriches your life, really. Sometimes the reactions from others can be unexpected, but sticking to your beliefs matters.
Former atheist, now agnostic whether or not God exists, is unknowable. That is precisely why faith exists. If existence could be proven or disproven, then faith would be unnecessary, and there would be only knowledge. For faith to exist, it requires that the existence of God cannot ever be proven or disproven. You either believe or you don't. For a Christian, it doesn't matter either way. What matters is how we treat each other in the here and now physical world. That is the test we must pass. What we know or don't know about the spirit world is completely irrelevant for the purposes of living a righteous existence.
I used to be sure there was nothing beyond this life. Then I started questioning things. It's weird to think about faith. It feels personal and different for everyone. I found meaning not in proving or disproving God, but in how we interact with others. In the end, it's more about being decent to each other now than worrying about what comes next. People do what they can with their beliefs.
I was raised in a secular/atheist home, so I never really got the spiritual experience as a child. After I graduated high school, I slowly sunk into the pit of addiction. It was a horrible few years for me that ultimately ended with me going to jail for 6 months. I went into rehab after that and slowly put my life back together. One of the things they stressed was finding a higher power to help you overcome addiction. Then I met my current who is a devout Catholic, and persuaded me to go to church with her. Something about it appealed to me, and I've been at it ever since. I don't know if it's correlated, but I'm finally starting to become at peace with my addiction.
It's interesting how life takes us on unexpected paths. Growing up without faith, then hitting rock bottom, and finding a way back through a partner's beliefs. It's good to see that church has been a positive influence. Sometimes, it just takes that little shift in perspective to help us find peace. Glad to hear you're on a better path now.
Not quite what you're asking, but I switched from atheist to agnostic after taking a couple theology courses. It just seems foolish to me to rule anything out. I certainly don't believe that there's a God who plays any active role in the universe, but it is conceivable to me that there could be a God who created it. The fact that we know the universe has a starting point is what gets me. What's to say we're not like character in The Sims? We know when our game starts, but we don't know who the creator of the game is, or even if we're in a game. I'm not saying I believe this, but unless I find proof that this isn't the case, I won't rule anything out.
It's interesting how your perspective changed after those theology courses. It makes sense to stay open to different possibilities. The analogy of life being like a game is thought-provoking. Just like in The Sims, the creator's existence can feel uncertain. It's a solid reminder of how much we don't know. Keeping an open mind while searching for answers is a pretty balanced approach, I think.
I had a personal experience which led me to find my faith. I don't know why or how, and I won't explain it because it would really only mean anything to me, but I think faith and religion are things you find on your own and take at your own pace. Organized religion and indoctrination of young people just doesn't sit well with me. My parents never put any pressure on me to believe anything, and I started out very cynical and stubborn. And this is not to say that all atheists are stubborn and cynical, just that I was an atheist at the time purely because I had closed my mind to everything that I couldn't see/touch. It wasn't until I really opened my mind to consider all possibilities that I began to really feel that I had a connection with something spiritual. I'm a Christian now, and I keep it private. It's just something I personally experienced.
It's interesting how personal experiences shape our beliefs. I can relate to you. I used to question everything too, feeling really closed off. It took some time, but eventually, I found something that clicked for me. I think keeping it private allows for a deeper understanding, without all the noise from outside influences. It's all about what makes sense to you, and that's what matters in the end.
I'm not exactly a believer in a higher deity, but life, universe, and all the rest seems at times just too well thought out and perfect for it to be all just a coincidence that started with a firecracker going off. I'm a rather sciencey guy, but I just can't rule out that there's something more. Maybe I just want it to be also a possibility.
I can relate to that feeling of uncertainty. You want to see rational explanations, but sometimes, things just feel too connected to be random. I've had moments where nature or just a perfect day made me question everything. It's like there's this intricate web holding everything together, even if I can't see it. Sometimes wishing for something more is just part of being human.
Studying biology here. There were really two effects that caused my conversion. The first being surrounded by people who carry the Holy Spirit. For a secular argument, let's just say people who dig Jesus. And that kind of pulled me towards Christianity. Then in my studies, learning about how insanely complex and perfect the cell has made me doubt that it was anything other than the creation F, a higher power.
It's interesting how different experiences shape our beliefs. When you're surrounded by people who have strong faith, it can be hard not to feel influenced by that. And then, studying something like biology, which shows the intricacies of life, can really play into that. Makes you think about the bigger picture. It's a unique perspective that ties together human experience and scientific discovery.
I'm in a serious relationship with a Jewish man. What inspired me was seeing the tradition that his religion inspired and how it brought his family together. I decided I want a tradition in my future family and decided to try it. I always thought that religion was illogical. Now I realize how comforting it can be with the right people.
It's interesting how relationships can change your perspective on things. When you're close to someone, you often see what they value and it makes you reconsider your own views. Tradition can really create a sense of belonging and unity within a family. It's cool that you're open to exploring new ideas and finding comfort in them. That kind of adaptability can strengthen your bond with each other.
I used to be a relatively hardline atheist in school. Typical, I'm right and everyone else sucks ass teenager attitude. As I got older, I just kind of lost time for arguing why I'm an atheist. Became something I thought about less and less. I basically just stopped caring about what faith I classified myself. Life was too busy to think about those things. At the end of the day, it got to the point where I was no longer so much of an atheist and had more time to hear about what others had to say and question what I believe. I basically came to the realization that whether a god created the universe or the universe just came to be naturally, it was much bigger than us, and we as a people don't really have a right to say what happened in the beginning, because we don't know, and probably never will. So I adopted a more agnostic approach, open-minded to everyone's ideas, and just living life the best I can. God or no, the chances of me being here are so small, which makes life a gift, not something to be wasted arguing with friends over whose God is better, haha.
I get that. I used to think I had everything figured out too, but life just kind of happens, right? You get busy, and those hard opinions fade. It's interesting how we can shift from a fixed mindset to something more open. Realizing the universe is so vast puts things into perspective. Rather than arguing, it's more about just appreciating life and different views. Makes sense to focus on living well instead.
Not much of a shift, but I used to be a hardline atheist. I now consider myself a doubtful agnostic. I no longer preclude any possibilities or make assumptions about the nature of our universe. However outlandish it may seem, it may just be that a single entity created us. It's one of many possibilities that we don't really know enough to speak on.
It's interesting how perspectives can change over time. I used to have strong beliefs about things, but now I find myself questioning more. I think being open to possibilities is important. Sometimes it feels like there's more we don't understand, and it's okay to admit that. It's kind of a relief, really, not to have all the answers and just explore different ideas without being too rigid in thinking.
Honestly, it was mostly me just getting my head dislodged from my ass. Like most people between the ages of 14 to 20, I thought I knew everything, including the workings of the universe. But a few years ago, I realized, no, I don't, and kind of started to listen to everything. I'm also more fun at parties now.
It's interesting how life can change your perspective. We all go through that phase of thinking we know it all. It took you some time, but realizing that you didn't have all the answers seems to have opened you up to new experiences. And being more fun at parties is just a bonus. It's cool to see how personal growth can lead to better connections with people.
I was a hardcore atheist, and now I'm pantheist, meaning I believe everything is God. The choice was completely my own, as I had come to the conclusion myself that I had wanted to be more positive about what would happen to me when I die. I feel better thinking I'll be reabsorbed by God when I die, and everyone, as God themselves, will be able to be happier and more successful in their lives due to my life and death.
That's an interesting shift in perspective. It seems like you found a way to reconcile your beliefs with your feelings about life and death. A more positive outlook can definitely help people cope with existential thoughts. It's cool that you arrived at this conclusion on your own and it resonates with you. Everyone needs a perspective that brings them peace.
A few years ago, I was trying my hand at stand-up comedy, and I was struggling to come up with jokes. Then I was on Tumblr, and I saw the Dara O'Brien quote about how he wouldn't make jokes about Muslims because he doesn't know anything about the religion. So I thought if I looked into Christianity, I'd find some jokes in there. As it happens, my first week at the church, I found my joke, an anecdote about a Lord of the Rings clip they used as an analogy for swearing oaths to God, but I also found a loving community of good people. It sort of filled a hole I'd been missing, so I went back and kept going back, and suddenly I know the words to all the trendy pop punk hymns they sang. Then I started to actually read the book and follow the sermons, and it all makes sense and gives me a perspective beyond that of my human life, and voila, one ex-atheist.
I tried stand-up comedy too, but it was tough to find material. I thought delving into Christianity might help, since I stumbled upon a quote about being respectful with comedy. I went to church, and honestly, I found a nice community there. I got into the music, read a bit, and it changed my view on things. It's interesting how something unexpected can fill a void you didn't even realize you had.
My transition from an atheist to a Roman Catholic was, believe it or not, very much an intellectual pursuit. There's a lot about the materialist worldview, I am a neuroscientist by training, that left me feeling quite empty, and my excursions into the various philosophical traditions that support atheist beliefs left me a cynical and nihilistic wreck. But the final straw, the thing that started my journey, was how unpleasant and uncommunal most atheists are. I just couldn't stand being around people who were so full of themselves. It was likely due to the fact that I am an academic, and most of my experience was with other academics. I started looking intently at humanism, and began the skeptical process of asking lots of why and how questions about humanism. That journey eventually led me to looking at the different religions, finally on Christ, and then finally on the history of Christianity and Catholicism. It's been a great journey, and I've learned more about faith and religion than I ever thought I could.
That's quite an interesting transition. It's not every day you hear about someone shifting from a purely materialist view to exploring faith like that. I guess grappling with those big questions can lead you down some unexpected paths. It's cool that your academic background helped you approach it all with a critical mind. Finding a sense of community and belief can be pretty fulfilling, especially after feeling disconnected.
For me, it was a slow process. The combination of being in the right time, the right places, meeting the right people, and having specific conversations that got me thinking less hatefully and more openly. The more enthusiastic believers would say that my converting was proof enough in God's existence. I do hesitate to go into it, though, because the people who don't share my beliefs want me to answer specific questions that I just don't have the answers to. Faith isn't something I can break down 100%. Articulating the emotions and specifics conversations that push me to look into converting falls flat with my vocabulary. My answers will not move you or rise to your expectations if you're looking for a satisfactory explanation to justify it to yourself. The process is unique, complex, and personal. The reasonings might not have pushed you or someone else were they in my position at the time, but it worked out for me, and that is what matters.
I get it. Sometimes the journey to change is just about being in the right spots and talking to the right people. It can be hard to explain those moments or feelings, especially when others expect clear answers. What matters is how it impacted you personally, even if it doesn't resonate with everyone. People's paths are unique, and that's okay. Your experience is valid, even without a full explanation.
I was raised Presbyterian and made a team effort to be the good Christian by going to church and Sunday school. In high school, my friend, who was really into the whole speaking in tongues this be is healed kind of church, would rope me in to go to a youth group on Fridays. Everyone would be going insane, rolling on the floor, passing out, crying, my friend included. I just stood there feeling nothing. And that was just the problem. I was going through a lot of crap in my teen years, and the only thing I felt besides that nothingness was anger or fear. I turned atheist, and so I was for about 3 or 4 years. Now I've always been fascinated by the paranormal, and a book I was reading mentioned paganism. I didn't know much about it, so I read some more. The more I read, the more I found solace in what I read, and it grew from there. That was about 13 or 14 years ago, and I've been pagan ever since. I may not be the best pagan, I may not celebrate every Sabbath, but my faith has helped me heal from my past and been a crutch to lean on in difficult times. It worked for me, I guess.
That's an interesting journey. Growing up in a strict environment and then experiencing something so different must have been tough. It's understandable to seek out belief systems that offer comfort, especially after feeling nothing for so long. Finding paganism as a way to heal is a personal choice that makes sense. Everyone searches for what works for them, and it seems like you found your path.
I tried out a youth group at the request of a friend. It was Christian-based, but you certainly didn't have to be a Christian to attend. I didn't really know any real Christians at that time, and after meeting the people in the youth group and attending their church to see how it was, I found that your average atheist was a lot more close-minded, ignorant, and malicious than your average Christian. Every atheist I knew mocked and derided anyone who was religious, but I never heard a word of negativity from any Christian I met. I considered myself a Christian for a while. I thought I felt some kind of higher power as I took part in the worship of my church, but I eventually decided it wasn't really Christianity that I believed in. I now consider myself an agnostic theist. I wouldn't say I believe in a God in any typical sense, but perhaps some kind of cosmic order of some description. I don't particularly worry myself about it anymore either way. I just treat others how I would like to be treated and try to enjoy life as it comes.
That experience sounds pretty eye-opening. It's interesting how meeting different people can shift your perspective. Sometimes, it takes immersing yourself in a new environment to see contrasting views. I get that feeling of searching for something bigger but then realizing what matters is just treating people well. Finding peace in how you live your life is what counts in the end, I think. Just taking it easy and enjoying life's moments works for many.
I find it fascinating you're studying biology and genetics and still believe in a deity. There's nothing wrong with that, so long as you don't fall into the same trap so many other great minds have. Just remember, if you cannot explain something, it's still far more likely the answer is rooted in physical processes that can be explained by science. The worship and belief in a deity should always remain personal and wholly separate from any scientific endeavors. With that said, I wish you the best of luck in both aspects of your life.
It's interesting how people can hold different beliefs while pursuing science. I had a friend who was passionate about biology, but also had strong spiritual views. We often debated how science and faith could coexist. Ultimately, we respected each other's perspectives. It was a reminder that personal beliefs don't always have to clash with scientific understanding. Just doing our own thing and navigating life.
This is something I know I miss as an atheist, the lack of reunion. I wish there was a secular community center where people from any belief could come and meditate, talk about stuff, read together, and do charity. Edit. So apparently, Unitarian Universalist is the most prominent organization, smiley face. Thanks for everyone who suggested, but there are a few congregations in my country and they are far from where I am. Next time I'm close, I'll definitely take a look.
I get that feeling. It's tough to find a space where people can just connect without the whole religious backdrop. A place to share ideas and just be with others sounds valuable. It's cool that you found out about Unitarian Universalist groups. Even if you have to travel a bit, sometimes it's worth it to seek out like-minded folks and build community.
I really like your response to this question. Even if you're passionate about atheism and won't ever change your mind, you can't deny the positive aspects of community. A good church provides that community. And, as you say, it only gives and takes nothing, which is a great sentiment. Edit. Since the same response keeps coming up, yes, the church as an institution and religion can do some pretty horrible things and take away some pretty basic human rights from actual people. I fully agree. I used the word sentiment for a reason. Further, when I used the word church, I wasn't speaking about the institution as a whole. I was speaking about one building where some people get together and do good things. I'm not saying all churches are like this, just that the good ones can be a positive force in the lives of their members and their community.
I get what you're saying. There's a lot to consider when talking about community. I've seen it myself with a friend who found support at a local church group. It wasn't about the bigger picture or the institution itself, but more about the people coming together for a common goal. They helped each other through tough times, and that connection really mattered. It shows that community can have a real impact, regardless of beliefs.
I have the opposite story. I grew up very religious, and I went to Christian high school, got to college, met some atheists who were better at loving people than I was. I started attending the atheist student group meetings in an attempt to proselytize, and I ended up doubting my faith and turned agnostic. It's wonderful to hear that someone has had the opposite experience.
It's interesting how perspectives can shift. I had a similar experience when I left home and met people with different beliefs. I thought I had everything figured out, but diving into those conversations opened my mind. It's cool to see how viewpoints can change and grow through new experiences. Sometimes, just being around different ideas can lead to some deep self-reflection. Everyone's journey is unique, and that's what makes it all intriguing.
Seriously, police are well trained to recognize the signs of an impaired driver. There wasn't a ticket because you can't ticket someone for being sleepy until they're actually doing something reckless. He just wanted to wake you up and make sure you weren't going to do anything unfortunate on the rest of the way home. Besides, you know that twilight state when you're about to fall asleep? Your concept of time is pretty fucked up around then. You have no actual idea how long it was between when you asked and that officer pulled you over.
I've been there too. You think you can make it home, but that twilight state hits hard. I remember driving after a long shift, feeling my eyelids weigh a ton. Then, there's that unexpected stop. An officer checking if I was okay, just doing his job. It's weird how time feels distorted in those moments. It's all a blur, and you realize how close you came to a mistake. Just glad he was there.
I was raised as a Catholic, but went to a Quaker school. Eventually, in my mid-teens, my parents converted to Quakerism. Although I would consider myself an atheist, I still attend meeting for worship on my own pretty frequently. The Quaker community is so warm and accepting that even if you don't know what to believe, it is still worth going just because it is always such a peaceful experience. I think where I'm going with this really, but it's so rare that I ever see mention of Quakers that I figured I'd dive in. Anyone who's looking for a welcoming community with amazing people, regardless of your religion, I would highly recommend you check out a Quaker meeting. Very different experience.
That's an interesting journey with faith. Growing up in one belief and then transitioning to another can shape your perspective. Quakerism seems to have left a good impression on you, especially with its focus on community and peace. It's nice to find a place where you feel accepted, regardless of your personal beliefs. Those experiences can really help a lot of people find a sense of belonging. Appreciate you sharing that.
I live in a state founded by Quakers, Pennsylvania. The chair of my department at my undergraduate university is a Quaker. The principal of one of my K-12 schools is a Quaker. As such, I've had to learn some stuff about the Quaker faith in school as part of learning Pennsylvania state history. I am a secular person, but I respect a lot of the Quaker ideals. One thing that the principal told us that really stuck with me was that God doesn't care what kind of clothes you can afford or choose to wear, so people don't get dressed up at the meeting house. Also, how Mass? I don't know what it's called. Anyway, church consists of friends together in a room, which is really nice, and when you feel inspired by God, you stand up and say something. The example I heard was a child who stood up and said something like, "I love my dog," with a big smile on her face, and then sat down. The other day, I drove by a friend's meeting house in Philadelphia with a big sign saying all are welcome. I thought it was really nice.
That's interesting. Quakers have a unique approach to faith. The idea of being casual in church, focusing on connection rather than appearance, is refreshing. It's nice that everyone is encouraged to share their thoughts, even something simple like loving a pet. Seeing a message like, "All are welcome," is a good reminder of inclusivity. It shows community values and a supportive environment, which can be hard to find sometimes.
This actually kind of sounds like Buddhism, in all honesty. Practicing Buddhism involves much more than just appreciating everything. It actually also sounds like certain branches of Hinduism. I believe it is the Upanishadic, it might be the Rig Vedas, tradition that there's a strong belief in Brahman. Brahman is literally everything, and everything is Brahman. The idea is that humans cannot even think of what Brahman really is because the human mind cannot even comprehend it. I don't know, thought it was cool and kind of relevant. I'm stony, you know how it goes.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting how different beliefs can overlap. The idea of Brahman being beyond human comprehension is pretty deep. It's like trying to wrap your head around something too vast. Been there, thinking about stuff like this after some late-night conversations with friends. It's wild how these thoughts can come up when you're just hanging out, feeling a bit out there. It's all part of the experience, I guess.
Why choose to believe something that makes you unhappy? Because for some, living in reality, regardless of how harsh, boring, etc. it may be, is far more rewarding than creating a personal reality in which one is simply deluding themselves in order to be happy. It's, I suppose, the rawest of intellectual honesty. This makes me uncomfortable, even unhappy, but it is dishonest to cast it aside because of those reasons. Nice post, by the way.
I get the point. Sometimes facing the truth is tough, but it can lead to real growth. It's like choosing to see things as they are instead of how you wish they were. That honesty can be unsettling but ultimately more satisfying. I've been there, and yeah, it's not easy, but it helps me appreciate the good moments more. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on this.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.